I started realizing, oh, the name calling, I felt different, like all the things that really started happening that year. And, for the next 2 or 3 years, it was a consistent theme, but I would just brush it off.
There are moments in life that strip everything else away. The awards, the television contracts, the magazine covers, the business empires built brick by brick over decades. All of it fades into the background the second the people you love most become vulnerable. For Chip Gaines, one of America's most beloved and recognizable television personalities, that moment came quietly, away from cameras, away from the crowds, and away from the version of himself the world had grown comfortable watching. What followed left millions of fans across the country reaching for tissues, reconsidering what they thought they knew about this family, and quietly reflecting on what truly matters when life becomes uncertain. This is the story of how a health crisis transformed not just a household, but the public's understanding of a marriage they had been watching for years without fully seeing. Chip and Joanna Gaines built something genuinely rare in modern entertainment. They rose from running a small renovation business in Waco, Texas, to becoming household names across America through their HGTV series Fixer Upper, which premiered in 2013 and quickly became one of the most watched home renovation shows in television history. But what made audiences connect with them so deeply was never really about the houses. It was about the two people standing in the middle of those broken spaces, laughing together, disagreeing, figuring it out, and consistently choosing each other through the mess. Chip played the wild card, loud, unpredictable, endlessly enthusiastic, the kind of person who would knock down a wall with a sledgehammer while cracking jokes that made the entire crew laugh. Joanna was the counterbalance, calm, visionary, quietly brilliant, the one who could look at a crumbling farmhouse and see the warm, beautiful home waiting inside it. Together, they created something that felt honest in a media landscape full of performance. By the time they launched Magnolia Network in 2021, their own dedicated cable and streaming channel, the Gaines family had expanded their world dramatically. They were raising 5 children, Drake, Ella Rose, Duke, Emmy Kay, and Crew, their youngest, who was born in 2018, years after fans assumed the family was complete. They were managing a retail empire, a publishing imprint, a restaurant, a bed and breakfast, a real estate presence, and a media network all at once. From the outside, the picture looked like a masterclass in controlled ambition. But people who have built things that large know the truth. Sustainable empires are built on people, and people are fragile in ways that no amount of success can protect against. Joanna Gaines has spoken honestly in interviews over the years about the physical toll that years of filming, traveling, renovating spaces, and managing a growing business took on her body. She has talked about exhaustion, about seasons where the pace of their lives felt genuinely unsustainable, and about the difficulty of being fully present as a mother while simultaneously being expected to function as a public figure, a creative director, an entrepreneur, and a television personality. These admissions, offered in her characteristically understated way, gave fans occasional glimpses behind the curated warmth of the Magnolia brand. But it was not until more recent years, as she opened up about facing real physical health challenges requiring medical attention and recovery, that the conversation shifted from the general pressures of a busy life to something much more specific and much more frightening. When word began spreading among fans that Joanna had been dealing with a serious physical condition, one significant enough to require surgery and an extended recovery period, the reaction across social media was immediate and deeply emotional. Comment sections filled up. Fan accounts posted messages of prayer and support. People who had never met Joanna Gaines wrote paragraphs about what she meant to them, about how Fixer Upper had gotten them through difficult seasons of their own lives, about how watching her work had inspired them to pursue things they were afraid of. The outpouring was genuine and striking in its intensity. But equally striking was what happened when attention turned toward Chip. Because Chip Gaines did something during that period that surprised people who thought they already knew him well. He went quiet. Not in a dramatic, attention-seeking way. Not in the way of someone performing humility for an audience. He went quiet the way a person goes quiet when the thing they love most in the world is suddenly at risk and there is nothing clever or energetic or funny they can do about it. The man who had built an entire public personality around restless, loud, joyful movement became still. And that stillness, once people recognized it for what it was, became one of the most emotionally powerful things his fans had ever witnessed from him. Those who follow Chip on social media noted the shift in his posts during that time. The humor was quieter. The presence felt more intentional, less performative. Where Chip had previously filled his platforms with the kind of chaotic, self-deprecating energy that made people feel like they were watching a friend rather than a celebrity, something more serious had settled in. When he did speak publicly about Joanna, his words carried a weight that years of television appearances had rarely revealed. He spoke about her the way someone speaks about a person they have genuinely reckoned with losing, not with the easy affection of a couple performing happiness for cameras, but with the kind of deep, slightly stunned gratitude that comes from having your assumptions about the future interrupted. In interviews and public appearances during and after Joanna's recovery period, Chip was noticeably more reflective. He talked about faith, about slowing down, about the things that actually matter when everything else falls away. He spoke about his children with an intensity that suggested the experience had sharpened his focus on what was truly essential. Friends and people connected to the Magnolia world described him as changed, not broken, but recalibrated. The boundless optimism was still there, but it now appeared to be grounded in something harder and more mature. The Chip Gaines people were watching had clearly been somewhere privately that the television cameras had never followed him, and he had come back different. For longtime fans, this was unexpectedly moving in a way that was difficult to articulate. Part of what made Fixer Upper so beloved was its apparent transparency. Viewers felt like they were watching real people navigate a real life, not a scripted fantasy. But there is a certain layer of performance that inevitably comes with being a television personality, a necessary distance between the self that faces cameras and the self that faces genuine fear in a quiet room at 3 in the morning. What Chip's response to Joanna's health crisis revealed was the person behind the performance. And that person, it turned out, was someone even more admirable than the character audiences thought they already knew. Joanna, for her part, has shown throughout her public life a quiet kind of courage that tends to go underappreciated precisely because it is so understated. She does not reach for drama. She does not invite pity. Even as she has spoken honestly about difficult periods, including the physical demands of recovery, the emotional complexity of slowing down after years of non-stop work, and the challenge of maintaining personal connections inside a marriage that is also a business partnership, she has done so with a groundedness that reflects someone who has done serious inner work about what her priorities actually are. Her willingness to be honest about vulnerability without performing it has always been part of what makes her trustworthy to audiences who have grown rightfully skeptical of celebrity openness. What the experience of Joanna's health challenges appeared to do for their marriage, at least as much as can be understood from the outside, was force both of them to confront questions that busy, ambitious, successful people often defer indefinitely. Questions about pace. About what they were building and who they were building it for. About whether the version of their life they were living was actually the version they would choose if they slowed down long enough to choose intentionally. Joanna has spoken about how the couple began making more deliberate space for their relationship itself, separate from Magnolia, separate from television, separate from the relentless creative and commercial demands that had defined so much of their shared adult life. Date nights that were actually about each other rather than the next project. Evenings at home that were allowed to be quiet. Time together that was not productive in any measurable sense but was valuable in the only sense that ultimately matters. Chip has echoed these themes in his own way, talking about gratitude with a specificity that suggests he means it rather than performing it. He has spoken about watching Joanna recover, about being present through that process, about what it felt like to be in a situation where his usual tools, energy, humor, determination, the ability to work harder than any problem, were simply not applicable. Helplessness is a profound teacher, and Chip Gaines appears to have learned from it in ways that have visibly changed him. The man who once seemed almost allergically opposed to stillness has spoken about finding something real and important in the slower rhythms of their life post-recovery. Their story also touches something universal that goes beyond celebrity admiration. Most people watching Chip and Joanna navigate this period were not watching because they cared deeply about Magnolia Network's quarterly performance or the trajectory of a Texas-based home design brand. They were watching because they recognized something. They recognized the fear of watching someone they love become fragile. They recognized the particular loneliness of being the healthy one when a partner is suffering, the helplessness that comes with having no useful role to play except simply being present. They recognized the quiet devastation of realizing that the life you have been building together is not invulnerable, that the future you assumed was waiting patiently can be interrupted without warning or permission. And they recognized, perhaps most powerfully, the love that becomes visible when everything else is stripped away. Not the telegenic love of a couple renovating a beautiful farmhouse together while the cameras roll. Not the aspirational love of a successful brand built around warmth and family values. But real love, the kind that shows up in the specific gravity of a person standing beside someone they cannot fix, choosing to stay anyway, quietly rearranging their entire sense of what matters so that the person they love most can feel less alone in their fear. That is what Chip Gaines revealed during Joanna's recovery. And fans, recognizing it for exactly what it was, were moved in a way that no carefully produced television moment had ever managed to achieve. There is something worth saying about how the Gaines family has handled the intersection of their public and private lives throughout this period. They have not turned Joanna's health challenges into content. They have not Monetized the fear or packaged the recovery into an inspirational narrative with clean chapters and a tidy resolution. What has emerged publicly has come through honest conversations and interviews, through the visible changes in how both of them carry themselves, and through the quiet signals that people who have been watching them for years learn to read. That restraint is itself a form of integrity, and it has made the moments of genuine openness far more powerful than any produced special could have been. By the time both Chip and Joanna began speaking more openly about how the experience had reshaped their priorities, the public narrative around them had already shifted permanently. They were no longer simply the fixer-upper couple, the Waco success story, the faces of a home design empire. They were two people who had been tested by something real and had come through it changed in ways they were still discovering. Their marriage, which millions had admired from a comfortable distance for years, suddenly felt more intimate and more worthy of admiration precisely because its imperfections and vulnerabilities had become visible. Fans who had followed them since the early days of Fixer Upper described feeling something unexpected: relief. Not relief that Joanna had recovered, though that was certainly part of it, but relief that the couple they had invested in emotionally was actually, genuinely real. That the warmth between them was not a performance. That Chip's devotion to Joanna was not a brand position. That the family they had been watching through a television screen for years was made of the same complicated, fragile, beautiful human material as everyone watching them. In the end, what Chip Gaines did after Joanna's diagnosis was both simple and profound. He showed up. He stayed. He let the world see, in the gaps between his usual energy and humor, how much she meant to him. He allowed the experience to change him rather than protecting the version of himself that had been so carefully constructed for public consumption. And in doing so, he gave millions of people something far more valuable than another renovation reveal or another charming television moment. He gave them evidence that love, when it is real, looks exactly like this: quiet, constant, unperformed, and completely transformative in ways that neither the person feeling it nor the people witnessing it can fully put into words. That is why fans were left in tears. Not because a story ended badly, but because a real one became briefly, beautifully visible.